As we passed through the woods, following a winding deer trail up and down the mountains, my thoughts kept turning back to Heejin and what she had said. "What do you think about all this?" I asked. He looked over at me with an icy glance. "Our mission doesn't require us to think about any of this. We're just gathering information and reporting back. Thank God we came when we did. Hopefully it's still early enough in the process to undo some of the damage." "What process?" He hesitated for a long moment, then started talking, looking straight ahead and not making eye contact. "The North Koreans aren't the only ones to make this breakthrough. Scientists in the US and Russia have also experimented with genetically engineered viruses or synthetic prions that can interact with dying tissue. At the expense of higher cognitive functioning, some of these viruses can keep the body alive, or even bring it back from the dead. In our experiments, the test subjects always ended up like the people here. Only the lower parts of the brain still function, those related to hunger and instinctual needs. They seem to feel no pain, and they have no memory or concept of self, as far as we can tell. But that's not the strangest part. When our scientists injected a group of recently deceased corpses, the corpses seemed to be able to communicate somehow, as if without words. Like birds in a flock? I asked, remembering my thoughts when I saw the silent river of bodies flowing into the town. He nodded grimly. "Somewhat, but this is more complex. We understand flock movement. It's simple science. Each bird keeps a certain gap between itself and every other bird, and so any movements on the fringes causes the entire group to move, as if of one mind. But in reality, they're all just responding instinctually to the desire to put a predetermined space between themselves and the other birds nearby. All these individuals moving in this way causes a seemingly disparate group of animals to form one collective action. Though this is in no way telepathic or unexplainable. But these undead..." He shook his head slowly, walking forward with determined steps, his heavy boots crushing the earth underneath. "It's something more. It isn't just instinct. It's like they can communicate without any external signal. I'll give you an example. We had 2 in barred prison cells in the same hall. Every meal, one of our men would come by and give them raw meat, which they would greedily eat as soon as it was thrown in. But something went wrong. The 2 reanimated corpses couldn't possibly see each other, and they never talk, not in words anyway. Sometimes they make noises like they're dying or being attacked, like we heard back there. It's always the same sound, never a scream or a cry of pain, but that strange drawn-out, "ah." I've heard similar things before. I remember listening to a Hitler speech about the final solution. As he advocated mass murder and extermination, the crowd began clapping and emitting the same bloodthirsty "ah," like a combination of bloodlust and adrenaline, of extreme pleasure and the promise of future death for the enemy. But why do they do it when they die? No one knows. Maybe we'll figure it out one day. But it's just one more unexplained part of their mob behavior. Anyway, one of the guards at the time was a good friend of mine. I'd actually gotten him the job from the company. He was in the Rangers with me for a couple of years. He was strong, smart, and had amazing reflexes. A true veteran of a soldier. And yet, in the end, none of that helped. The other guard was giving the meat to the undead. He broke protocol by reaching through the bars and dropping it. The corpse was, so he said, across the room. But in a blur, it lunged at him and grabbed his hand. He began screaming as it bit his fingers off, holding his wrist in a death grip. My friend turned to look, standing next to the bars, and the other creature, who had been prone in the corner and appeared totally blank, almost hibernating, suddenly appeared and reached through the bars. My friend had his back to the cage, only for a second, while he turned around to look at the source of the screaming. But it was enough. The zombie grabbed him by his shoulders, forcing his back to the bars with its superhuman strength. This man was a beast, and he worked out every day, but he couldn't release himself from the grip of this smaller, emaciated, undead creature. It happened so quickly that no one even realized they were attacking until it was over. The undead man slammed my friend's head into the bars over and over, gripping him by the neck from behind. My friend lost consciousness quickly, his body going limp, but the creature kept slamming the back of his skull into the metal until it broke in multiple spots. He ended up going into a coma and dying a few days later without ever waking up. When the SWAT team came to deal with the attack, they found the undead creature licking the blood and hair and bone fragments off the dirty metal bars, as blank and quiet as ever. But that blankness is a front. It's a damn lie. They're much smarter than you might think. We walked in silence for a while. I admired the beautiful mountain views. It seemed such a contrast to the horrors nearby. Few people who visited the area would ever believe that a biological weapons laboratory dealing in human experimentation hid nearby. Moreover, we had been warned before we left that the North Koreans may have secret camps in the area to use prisoners as slave labor and keep the human guinea pigs close to the laboratory, so they could be slaughtered and experimented upon easily and at once. Seeing as the company had access to high-tech spy satellites that could see a dumpster from outer space, I figured this warning was a guarantee that we would see concentration camps as well. Finally, I saw a break in the trees. The sun had started to go down behind the mountains, and a cool breeze began to blow through the area. The sweat on my forehead from hiking so far evaporated quickly, and I started to feel relief that we had actually reached our destination. Now we could finish this horrible task and go home. But a chill ran through my body as I peered through the trees at the building. From here, I could see the metal door on the front of the complex stood wide open. Across the front wall, written in Korean in the same huge black writing as before, appeared only 3 words. Come and see. We argued for a few minutes. I did not want to go in. It's clearly a trap. Why is the door wide open? They know we're here and they want us to go in so they can ambush us and capture us. It couldn't be more obvious. But Agent Hudson wasn't so sure. He thought that the words had nothing to do with us, and that the door may have been left open by fleeing people. Our mission is to go in and find out what's going on. We have no choice. If it is a trap, don't get taken alive. But with the amount of chaos in this area right now, we will never have a better chance than we do at this moment. We need to take it. I sighed. Stay close to me and cover our backs. Now let's go. By the time we broke out of the woods, moving silently with guns raised, darkness had descended. The biological weapons laboratory still had electricity, and bright lights shone from all around it. We first had to move through a razor wire fence on the outer perimeter of the complex. It had a guardhouse situated at the only gate. I noticed that this road was paved, unlike all the others I had seen, and it looked fairly new. The North Koreans apparently had plenty of money to spend on the military, but none to spend on their own people or residential infrastructure. I could see the entire complex much more clearly now. I passed by the guardhouse, close behind Agent Hudson, glancing inside as I went. I saw a dead man there. His face eaten off. His skull gleamed white behind the red gore, like a macabre Christmas decoration. The complex itself looked massive. I couldn't see the end of it. Constructed of gray, smooth concrete with a flat roof and no windows, it came across as one of the most depressing and utilitarian architectures I had ever beheld. It rose 4 stories in the air, but we knew from informants that it also descended another 5. What we wanted was down below, as the upper stories were mainly used for bureaucracy and paperwork. The actual experiments and pathogens were kept below, and the deeper one descended, the more virulent and dangerous the pathogens became. Between the fence and the complex, a field extended around the square building, the paved road winding its way through the neatly trimmed grass. Without hesitation, we sprinted through the open area. I kept checking our backs, but despite the feeling of eyes watching me, I saw no sign of anyone. Soon we were inside the complex. The breeze came in with us, but no longer did the smell of pure mountain air and forests surround us. A fetid odor, rotten and thick, permeated the entire complex. I looked down the hallway, seeing portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, as well as various propaganda posters, many of them showing nuclear missiles and ICBMs. "We will incinerate our enemies in a sea of fire," one poster to my right exclaimed, a North Korean soldier's face painted in front of a soaring nuclear missile. A wall of fire and smoke in the background. Agent Hudson and I stopped to rest for a moment in this strange milieu of totalitarianism and nationalism. North Korea had always reminded me of a modern, real-world 1984. "We have to go to the bottom floor," Agent Hudson said, breathing heavily. I nodded, already knowing that. He had a tendency to repeat information in tense situations. I always assumed it somehow relieved his anxiety. That crippling, heart-tightening feeling before a battle or a life-and-death situation. "Lead the way," I said, smiling at him, trying to relieve the tension. We found a stairway and began descending. The smell of rotting bodies grew worse. The air grew thicker as we descended. No longer did the sweet mountain breeze blow around us. I coughed, almost throwing up, bending double. Agent Hudson whipped around, putting his fingers to his lips, his eyes blazing. By the time we got to the bottom floor, I was breathing through my mouth, my eyes watering. I wished they had given us gas masks or respirators. I couldn't imagine how anyone could work here, though I also couldn't imagine eating grass and rats on a daily basis. Agent Hudson silently pushed the door open, disappearing into the dark corridor with his rifle raised. I followed closely behind. I found a long, dimly lit hallway. Down here, There were no propaganda posters, no portraits of the great leader. It felt cold and blank. Concrete walls opened into rooms without doors. We moved into the first room, and I nearly vomited at what I saw. A man tied down to a stretcher and gagged. He had been dissected alive without anesthesia. He moved his head wildly, his gleaming eyes staring at us in horror. I saw his entire chest and stomach cut open, and I could see the thready, rapid heart beating in the open surgical wound. The ribs had been removed and placed neatly in a pile beside the living man. Without hesitation, I stepped forward, raising my tranquilizer gun, and shot him in the arm. It would be a fatal dose. A rapid cessation of breathing without any Revivon to counteract the lethal opioid. As etorphine was nearly 100 times stronger than fentanyl. Turning around rapidly, we left the room, moving along the corridor of nightmares. In the next room, we found a woman's corpse with massive bubonic sores all over her body. Viscous yellow fluids ran out of the wounds. They concentrated along the locations of her lymph nodes, with pustules the size of oranges swelling out of her neck and armpits. That looks like the Black Death. We should probably get out of here. This isn't helping, and I don't want to be near that crap. I can't believe they don't even contain highly infectious biological agents in plexiglass or something here, like we do back in the States. These people probably make $1,000 a year. I reminded him. This is one of the poorest countries imaginable. Hell, I'm surprised they can even keep a constant flow of electricity to this building. We kept moving, and to my surprise, the next office wasn't some den of horrors. It was an office. It looked like the office of a doctor or a scientist, with posters of the human body covering the walls. In the corner, I saw a man cowering behind his desk, dressed in a white lab coat. He was skinny, like every North Korean I'd seen, with black framed glasses. I looked over at his thin face, high cheekbones, and small chin. It didn't look like the face of a devil. Agent Hudson and I stared at him in surprise for a fraction of a second. He used the opportunity to raise a pistol. Before I knew it, he had fired. No! I cried instinctively, raising my gun and shooting him in the chest. I turned to see Agent Hudson on the ground. I ran towards the scientist, who now lay on the floor, a puddle of blood spreading underneath his body and soaking into his white coat. I took the gun away from him and then ran back to Agent Hudson. I saw with immense relief that the bullet had hit him in his Kevlar body armor, directly above the navel. It would probably leave a deep, painful bruise, but it wouldn't kill him. He grunted, sweating now. "God damn, that hurts," he said through gritted teeth, breathing fast. I left him on the ground and went back to the scientist. He was still alive. The bullet appeared to have hit him in his left shoulder. It bled heavily, but it didn't appear to have torn any arteries or major blood vessels. I knelt down next to him, putting my gloved hand on the wound and pressing down. He screamed in pain. "Hurts, doesn't it? So I want to play a game with you. If you give me the right answers, I'll let you live. If I think you're lying to me, though..." I took one finger and reached into the bullet wound, pressing hard against the shattered bone fragments, feeling the warm blood running down around my gloved finger. He nearly passed out, his face turning pale. But he came back to consciousness, shrieking and waving his arms. I took my finger out, flicking the blood off with a smile. Okay, so what's your name?
Dr. Lee.
Okay, Lee. And what do you do here?
I'm the head scientist for the research program here.
And are you the one responsible for all the walking corpses nearby? He hesitated for a long moment. I sighed, bringing my fist back and punching him in the nose, hard. I felt it crack under the blow, his head slamming back into the concrete floor. He began to plead and cry.
Please,
he said, blood streaming out of his nose.
Don't hurt me anymore. I'll tell you.
Agent Hudson had, by this point, gotten shakily to his feet and walked over towards us. He leaned heavily on the desk, looking down at Dr. Lee with hatred.
Yes, I was in charge of the resurrection virus. We had obtained a sample from Russia, gathered by bribing one of the head scientists in their project. But I have no idea how it escaped from the laboratory. We had only given it to a few subjects here.
And those subjects? Are they still here? He nodded, his face a bloody mess, his nose crooked and smashed. What about the rider on the skeletal horse? He looked at me in confusion, a genuine expression, as far as I could tell.
The what?
You don't know anything about some monster with bulging black eyes who rides around on a horse made of bones? He looked at me like I was insane, and I figured that was answer enough. I looked at Agent Hudson. What do you want to do with this one? We should, in reality, take him as hostage. He likely has a lot of vital information. Shaking his head, Agent Hudson pulled his pistol out of his holster. There's too much danger in our escape route. We weren't counting on zombies when we made them. So, change of plans. No hostages. He aimed his pistol directly at the center of Dr. Lee's face. But we were so intent on our work, neither of us noticed the undead who had entered the room. Dr. Lee's eyes widened, but not at the sight of Agent Hudson's pistol. He looked behind him, beginning to whimper and plead. I spun around, seeing a small girl missing an arm. It looked surgically amputated at the shoulder, and the wound still had a yellowish pus and watery blood leaking out. Her eyes, though, were not the eyes of a little girl. They looked like glass eyes, as lifeless as a statue's. Though this mission took place a few months ago, those eyes still haunt me. And in my nightmares, I still see them daily. With a vicious, rabid expression on her face, she sprinted forward, a blur of bloody skin and fluttering white hospital gown. Jumping on Agent Hudson's back, she began to furiously bite at his neck. He spun around in circles, trying to throw her off and screaming for help. I ran forward, but another body tackled me from the side, throwing me over the desk. As my shoulder smashed into the wood, my rifle went flying out of my hands. I landed on the chair, crushing it beneath my body, feeling the wood splinter and cut into my exposed skin. Rising quickly, I reached for my pistol, looking across the desk at the blank doll's eyes of the man standing there. A bullet hole in the direct center of his chest. I saw marks of the Black Death on his body as well. Swollen lymph nodes turned black and purple, fluid-filled pustules the size of eggs rising on his skin. I shot him in the brain, and he went down, kicking and writhing. Agent Hudson had, by now, thrown the girl off and whipped his pistol around, shooting her in the face. Blood streamed down his neck from deep cuts where large parts of his skin had been bitten off. "Oh, Jesus," he said, wincing. "That hurts." "We need bandages."
We have medical supplies at my desk,"
Dr. Lee said, pointing at the drawer. I quickly got out disinfectant and bandages, attending to Agent Hudson's wound. He breathed fast, but showed no signs of pain as I cleaned and wrapped it.
"You're going to need my help to make it out of here. There's too many of those things. If you agree not to kill me, I'll help you and give you whatever information you need."
As if on cue, I heard doors slamming from the floors above us, echoing down the stairways.
More of them are rising, and the concentration camp nearby has thousands of bodies. If you don't take my help, you'll be overwhelmed. There's secret passages near here.
We quickly agreed to take Dr. Lee with us. Grabbing a medical kit, we got him up. I recovered my rifle and pointed it at the back of his head. "Lead the way," I said, as dozens of footsteps began descending the stairs.